Human civilizations are based in moral certainty. When we feel that our reality is one of near complete moral ambiguity, there is a clear source of good and bad in the ultimate source of good and bad being the positive and negative feelings of beings. Feelings having presence in their own right, but regardless, it's a clear source for good and bad, but the right thing to do, right and wrong in that sense, is it's not even enough to say that it's constantly in flux. It is constantly in flux, but more than that, it is in nearly all situations, at least all ones encountered in the common human life on planet Earth, and any place that is as crowded and delicate and intricate with organisms as Earth. Every single action you take has such an immense, incalculable set of consequences and knock-on effects that you could not possibly, even with the clear source of good and bad of the feelings, the positive and negative feelings, even with that, even if you had perfect knowledge of those feelings, you could not possibly calculate the ultimate impact of any given action, much less all actions that you take. You could not possibly determine whether any given action ultimately resolves to having an overall positive or negative effect, because even the slightest action has effects that ripple out through space and time forever and influence everything that they touch, and do so in complex and variable ways, and unpredictable ways. But human civilizations are built on moral certainty. They're built on a code, a law, a set of agreed upon best practices. There are, on very close levels, ways to see actions as having mostly positive or mostly negative effects most of the time. You know, killing, for instance, is usually a very, very distressful, very negative, therefore very bad thing on a local level on those who are impacted the most directly by the killing, which is those who are killed and those who are connected to those who are killed. So on that level, it makes sense to say that killing is a bad thing, to have a law against killing, to have a code against it as a categorical imperative to avoid. And let me be clear, we don't, I guess, endorse killing. We are making a point about its moral complexity here, but we still, it is something that we try to avoid, although perhaps we're not playing out our own, being true to our own read of the situation if we do so. Regardless, while it is typically a bad thing to those closest to it, the effects will ripple on and have all kinds of positive and negative effects that could never be tallied up. And this code, this law, not just the killing law, but laws in general, categorical judgments, they only hold up if you narrow your view enough, if you narrow your picture of the situation and your analysis enough, such that you do not see the full breadth of the effects going on. There are other ways in which a civilization necessarily narrows its vision, its frame of analysis of events to make things clear, cut and dry, because a civilization makes use of violence to enforce these laws and these codes. And so, necessarily, the laws must be preventing more bad or more violence than the violence used to enforce them is creating. And I suppose that is a central tension of politics, at least in current times and probably throughout much of history, are these laws preventing more violence than the enforcement of them is causing? Are they preventing more bad than the enforcement of them is causing? In many cases, No. I just said you can't make a judgment on that. That is, you can't make a judgment on that without limiting your scope. Sometimes it makes sense to limit your scope in analysis, but when you are dealing with things of wide relevance, such as the ultimate good and bad of actions, you can't limit your scope. You have to take into account everything. Not everything as a conceptual object, that's impossible, but you have to take into account the whole space of possibilities of relationships and of interactions. And human civilizations, as they are, necessarily do not do that. Because then, once you broaden the scope too much, then the good and bad becomes ambiguous, and then the laws become ambiguous, and then the violence used to enforce the laws becomes silly. They narrow the scope in terms of time and space and interaction involved, in terms of influence and existence and presence. They narrow it in terms of whose feelings matter, what kinds of feelings matter, what kinds of beings might have feelings. Personally, we believe that feeling is a universal aspect that is involved in all beings, even what would be considered non-living beings, non-biological phenomena. But for some, that may be seen as taking it too far, but civilizations do necessarily narrow the scope of that to some arbitrarily decided set or subset of beings. So this is the feeling that we have wrestled with internally. I don't know if wrestled with is the right terminology to use here, because we try not to have conflict with our feelings. It's difficult sometimes, but we try to let in the feelings and ideas as much as we can, because we think that that's the best way to that's information that is starkly relevant to us, because it is coming from us, and so in some ways it's kind of our duty to let in those feelings and allow them to take up space and time in our life, in our experience, in what we are as a being. So we have felt that feeling a lot in the past, and today in particular we were feeling that very strongly the moral ambiguity. It made it hard. It made it hard to feel good about ourselves. But I don't think that it has to mean that we feel bad about ourselves. I think that because we live in a civilization where everything is founded on moral certainty and where the morally pure are, well, in theory, the morally pure are empowered. Certainly not in practice. Certainly not. But the sort of foundational dream, the foundational illusion or image, ideal of the civilization is that there is moral certainty and the morally pure are empowered to carry out their morally pure will. And so, of course, when we look at our actions, we see the death and the violence that's involved, even to microbes, to microorganisms. They are organisms just like us. They wish to stay together. They work to survive and to propagate and to thrive. And when we wash our hands, when we clean something with a chemical, when we even just exist with our immune system, we are killing many, many of them. And it may feel right to us, it may feel wrong to us. The situation is ultimately morally ambiguous. It must be. It can't not be, because of the way that everything is interconnected and all actions influence infinitely more actions in an unpredictable way. And so, of course, because of the civilization that we live in, where we are brought up from a young age, not even being told it, it's the unspoken thing. It's the environment that we live in that everyone needs to get in line with the established moral certainty and perform it well. And that if you do not, you are a bad person. So of course because that is where we have spent our entire lives inside of, we had no framework to feel good about ourselves within that moral ambiguity. But the thing is, all beings in this universe exist within that moral ambiguity, to some degree at least. All beings, even non-living beings, even beings like planets way out in the depths of space, they live in that moral ambiguity as well. And all beings are influenced by the presence of one another. And at times they are emboldened, invigorated, they have connection and joy, they are helped. At times they are torn down, broken apart, destroyed, hurt. They feel sadness or betrayal. That is the reality that we all live within. We are all within that space together. We always have been, we always will be. That is what this universe is, at least on this level of duality, of interaction and relationship. And so we can enjoy the happiness when it's here, and we can take in the suffering when it comes. And so can, on the deepest level, so can all beings. And also on the deepest level, all beings want to harmonize. On the deepest level, all beings care about the feelings of all beings, and they want to find a place within these relationships that is harmonious, that brings well-being and joy. So, this moral ambiguity that everyone lives under, that no one chose and no one can get away from, that everyone navigates and lives through, of course it does not make you bad. You are good. Everyone is good. We're all in this together. Sometimes there are very, very bad feelings. Sometimes things happen. They cause very bad feelings. Sometimes beings go around causing bad feelings and not really helping with much good feelings. That is very difficult, agonizing at times, and tragic. But it does not change the fact that we are all, at the end of the day, the universe. We're all in this together. The energy within those bad actors, as they may be, came together from somewhere and is going to go out somewhere as well. And maybe it is naive, of course. We don't know for certain any of the things that we're saying right now, but we believe that the very act of energy existing in relationship with the good and the bad feelings is processed through its existence in these beings, and it ultimately leads more and more towards good, because good is defined by what beings want. The good feelings are defined by the feelings that beings who feel them move towards. And like we said, at their very core, at the very heart, all beings care about the feelings of all beings. So we exist in moral ambiguity. There's no getting around that. But it does not make us bad. It means that things are difficult, but when you are able to look at the world and accept what it is, then things will become... they will appear more difficult, perhaps, if the picture was missing some difficult things before, but in reality it will become less difficult overall. So that's the universe we live in, at least the way we see it. We're all in this together. We're happy to be here. We're excited to see where things go. It certainly is very difficult times for many. But times don't last forever. We hope that you will be well. We hope that you will be very well, now and in times to come. We hope that that wellness will spread and deepen and flourish into things more wonderful than today we could ever imagine. And we think it will do that. It will take time, but we think that will happen. We look forward to it. Of course, we could be wrong about all this stuff. Please go ahead and question anything that seems off to you, and question even harder anything that makes perfect sense to you. Don't take our word for it. Look into it for yourself and find for yourself what does and does not ring true. Because when we say these are just words. It is your perception, your understanding that is able to carry any sort of valuable energy from this in the first place. So please question and attack and doubt this little speech. Rip it apart until nothing stands but what you yourself have found. And have a wonderful day.